My name is James. I am a retired carpenter, a man who spent his entire life building homes for others, while keeping my own small house warm and safe. My wife passed away 5 years ago, and since then, my son Michael became the closest thing to family I had left. He had a wife, Claire, and 2 little children. For years after my wife's passing, they always invited me to spend Christmas with them. But things change. People change. It was early December when I called Michael. I could already imagine the smell of roasted ham, the sound of wrapping paper tearing, the sparkle of the Christmas tree in his living room. I asked him cheerfully, what time should I come over on Christmas Eve? There was a pause on the line, too long, then his voice came, but it wasn't warm, it was heavy, almost tired. Maybe this year you should stay at home. You're too old to keep up with everything. The kids are busy, and Clara thinks it might be better if it's just us. At first, I didn't understand. My heart sank, but my mind refused to believe what I heard. Too old. Michael, Christmas isn't about keeping up, it's about being together. I'm your father, your children's grandfather. He sighed. Please don't make this harder. You'll be fine. We'll call you. Maybe next year. Maybe next year. The silence that followed was heavier than any coffin I had ever carried. My hands trembled, and for the first time in my life, I felt like a stranger in my own family. I hung up without another word. My house suddenly felt colder. My wife's picture on the mantel seemed to look at me with pity. I whispered to her, "Did you hear that? He doesn't want me there." I told myself I would let it go. I told myself Michael was stressed, that maybe Clara had pressured him, but deep down, something darker started to stir inside me. Because in that moment, I realized my son had not just closed his door to me, he had closed his heart. And what he didn't know was that this small cruelty would set off something I didn't even know I was capable of. I went to bed that night with tears in my eyes, but when I woke up, I felt something else burning inside, the faint, bitter seed of revenge. And that was only the beginning. The next morning, I tried to shake it off. I made myself coffee, Saturday by the window, and tried to tell myself I was overreacting. After all, people say things they don't mean, but maybe Michael would call back, apologize, and invite me after all. But instead of a call from him, I got a call from my neighbor, Martha. She was the kind of woman who knew everything that happened on our street. Her voice was filled with pity. "James, dear, I heard Michael and his family just bought a new car, a luxury one. They showed it off yesterday." I frowned. See, I knew my son had money problems. He had borrowed from me many times, promising he would pay me back. I never asked for it because he was my son, my blood. But to hear he had money for a new car, yet no space for his father at Christmas, it felt like a knife in the back. I forced a smile into my voice. "Yes, Martha, that's good for them." But inside, I was boiling. Later that day, I tried calling Michael again. He didn't pick up. I sent him a message, "Son, I'd still like to come. Please let me know." No reply. I Saturday in my quiet house, looking at the small tree I had decorated alone. I thought of the nights I worked double shifts when he was a boy, just to buy him the bicycle he wanted. I thought of the winters when I went without a coat so he could stay warm. I thought of his wedding, where I gave him money I couldn't afford, just so he could start his life with dignity. And now he told me I was too old. That night, I couldn't sleep. My chest hurt, not from age, but from betrayal. My wife's voice echoed in my mind, reminding me of the man I used to be, strong, respected, needed. The more I thought, the more I realized Michael hadn't just forgotten me. He had discarded me like old wood from a workshop, useful once, now tossed aside. And that realization turned my sadness into something sharper, something colder. Because when a man has nothing left to lose, he becomes dangerous. I Saturday at my desk, opened an old wooden box, and pulled out a notebook. Inside it were records, dates, debts, all the times Michael had come to me for money. I had written them down, not because I wanted them back, but because I wanted to remember how much I had given. I flipped through the pages, gently a reminder of how he had used me, thousands of dollars, thousands of sacrifices. And suddenly, a thought came to me, a thought so clear it almost scared me. If Michael wanted me out of his life, I would show him what life was like without me. I stared at those old records for hours. Each page told a story. Each number carried weight. Michael had borrowed from me for his first apartment, for his business idea that never worked, for the down payment on his house. He promised he would pay me back, like he never did. I never pressed him because I believed in him. He was my son. But then, as I flipped to one of the last entries, something caught my eye. A document tucked between the pages, a copy of the loan agreement I had signed years ago. I gave him the money to start his company. My name was there as guarantor. My stomach turned cold. That company had failed miserably. Michael had walked away, but my name was still tied to it. The only reason it didn't crush me financially was because I had quietly worked extra jobs, sold off some of my wife's jewelry, and paid off parts of the debt myself. He never knew. And now he was driving luxury cars, telling me I was too old to sit at his table. That was when my grief turned into a plan. I thought to myself, Michael believes I am powerless. He thinks I am just an old man sitting in an empty house, waiting to die. But he has forgotten that the same hands that built his childhood home can also dismantle everything he has built. I began digging deeper. I still had contacted old friends in the bank, people who remembered me as a trustworthy man. I made a few calls, pretending to ask harmless questions. Slowly, I pieced together that Michael's finances were not as golden as they appeared. The car was leased, his house mortgage was stretched thin, and worst of all, his company debts had not fully disappeared. They were only resting, like a sleeping snake waiting to strike. And guess who still had the paperwork that could awaken it? I sat back in my chair, my old bones aching but my mind sharper than it had been in years. I whispered to myself, he wants to push me out, then I'll show him what it means to lose everything. But revenge cannot be rushed. It must be planned carefully, like a carpenter shaking wood. One wrong cut, and the whole thing collapses. So I waited, I watched, I prepared. When Michael finally called me 5 days before Christmas, it wasn't to invite me over. His voice was cheerful, almost arrogant. Hey Dad, just checking in. Hope you're doing okay. We'll video call you on Christmas Eve, so you won't feel left out. Left out. The word stung worse than any knife. I forced myself to keep my voice calm. Thank you, that would mean a lot. But inside, I was already setting the stage. Because what he didn't know was that by the time that video call came, his world would be crumbling. That night the house felt too small for the storm inside me. I sat at my kitchen table with a single lamp on, the light yellow and kind, but it couldn't warm the cold I felt. I looked at the calendar. Christmas in a week, and the empty chair across from me felt like an insult. Every memory of Michael as a boy came back. Scraped knees I patched, birthdays I faked a surprise for, nights I sat up worrying when he didn't come home. He may have outgrown my lap, but I never stopped being his father. Or so I thought. When I picked up the phone, I did not call to beg. I did not call to cry. I called to listen. I called people who knew things. People I'd helped years ago and who still owed me favors. An old bank clerk remembered my name and asked why I was calling. I said I suspected an error on some old papers. He promised to glance at a file and call me back. Another call was to an attorney I'd known through church. He'd helped me draw a will once. Polite and careful, I asked him a neutral question about guarantor rights, about contracts that reawaken. I won't lie, walked a line that night. I felt the rough edge of rage and the soft patch of sorrow rubbing against each other. The lawyer's voice was calm. If you can produce the original loan documents, and the guarantor signature is intact, certain protections could be lifted, he said, his words clinical. I didn't press for details. I don't need to know how to break a man and lay that the pressure points exist. As the days moved closer to Christmas, Michael's calls were light and perfumed with false cheer. He'd post pictures on social media smiling children, a decorated tree, his new car shining as if to announce success. Comments poured in from friends congratulating him. I felt my stomach twist as people celebrated what I had helped build. I tried to act normal when neighbors stopped by. I smiled and shook hands, but the smile felt like borrowed clothing. One evening, Clara called me. Her voice was bright. Hey, we've sorted everything. Don't worry, this year you'll have your TV and some cookies. Promise. Her promise was a slap wrapped in sugar. I could hear the faint laughter of children in the background. Muffled and safe, I asked her to tell Michael I was looking forward to the call on Christmas Eve. She said she would, but her tone said the promise was thin, and I knew words could be as empty as a stocking hung with no care. Pain turned to memory, turned to anger so fast it surprised me. I remembered the nights I worked double shifts. I remembered the hospital bills I paid when Michael was sick, and I sold tools to cover the expenses. I remembered my wife's voice telling me to be proud of our boy. Each memory was a brick in a wall. I was beginning to build not a wall to keep people out, but one to mark the distance they had created. I started visiting places I had avoided for years. The old mortgage office, the brick storage unit where I kept papers. I moved carefully, pretending to be a confused old man dealing with dust. Inside the storage unit, under a tarp that still smelled faintly of my wife's perfume, I found what I'd hoped for: original documents, signatures in my own shaky script, the papers that tied me to his failures. Seeing my name next to his, finally, felt like a revelation. It was ugly and powerful all at once. I took the papers home, feeling the weight of them like a second heart. For the first time, I understood the true power of the past when it's written down. I saw how a word on paper could change a life. I ran my thumb over my signature and felt both guilt and relief. I was about to wake a sleeping debt, but this was not just about money. It was about respect, about the right to be seen. That night I made one small, deliberate choice. I sealed an envelope and addressed it to the bank that had been kind enough to take my payments for years. I did not write what was inside on the outside. I walked to the post box in the cold and dropped it in with a steady hand. The morning after I sent the envelope, the winter air felt sharper. It bit at my cheeks when I stepped outside, and for the first time in years, I didn't mind the cold. It reminded me I was alive, still capable of choices with teeth. I didn't expect to hear anything right away, but 2 days later, I received a call. The bank manager, a man younger than my own son, spoke to me with cautious politeness. "Mr. Harris," he said, "we received your documents. I must say, this is unusual. Most people don't keep original records this long." I smiled to myself. Carpenters keep everything, with scraps, nail, receipts. Nothing is ever useless. He chuckled nervously before clearing his throat. "Well, your file raises some questions. There are unresolved guarantees tied to your son's old company. If this comes to light officially, it could have consequences." "Consequences," I repeated softly, savoring the word. "Yes, I understand." He assured me they would review the matter and get back to me. I hung up, my hands steady, my heart beating like a drum. The first stone had been set in motion. That evening, I Saturday alone at my kitchen table, with a candle lit beside my wife's photograph. "You'd hate this," I whispered to her smiling face. "You'd tell me to forgive him, but if you were still here, he wouldn't dare treat me this way. He wouldn't forget where he came from." I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, something I hadn't touched in years. The burn felt good. It reminded me that justice should sting. Days passed, and Christmas crept closer. Each morning, I imagined Michael waking up, confident in his shiny life. I pictured Claire wrapping gifts, my grandchildren laughing as though the world had no cracks, and me, I was invisible to them until the storm would finally knock at their door. On the 23rd of December, I took my second step. I met with the lawyer from church, the one I had called earlier. I brought the documents with me. He examined them carefully, his brow furrowed. "These are valid," he confirmed. "With the right filing, the creditors can reopen claims. It won't just affect your son's company, it could ripple into his personal assets. House, car, savings." I nodded slowly. "And if I choose to pursue this?" He hesitated. "It could ruin him. Are you sure that's what you want?" I looked him in the eye, and for the first time in years, my voice did not shake. "I don't want to ruin him. I want him to understand what it feels like to be thrown away." The lawyer sighed. "I can help you file, but once this begins, it can't be undone." I signed the papers without hesitation. My hand was steady as it pressed ink onto the page. That night, the weight on my chest felt lighter. For years, I had been the quiet father, the forgiving man, but as the clock ticked closer to Christmas Eve, I realized I had become something else, something sharper, something my son never expected. I was not simply waiting for justice. I was building it, piece by piece, like a carpenter shaping his final masterpiece. Christmas Eve arrived, and with it came a message I had not expected so soon. My phone buzzed, and when I checked, it was an email from the bank. The subject line was short, but heavy. "Notification of review." I opened it slowly, my hands trembling only slightly. Inside was a formal notice they had reopened Michael's company file. His debts, long thought to be buried, were now alive again. My documents had confirmed what they needed. The bank would be contacting him soon. I leaned back in my chair, the glow of my small Christmas tree flickering beside me. For the first time in years, I smiled. Not the smile of a father on Christmas morning, but the smile of a man who had been silenced for too long. That evening, Michael called. His face appeared on the screen. His house behind him glittering with decorations, his children bouncing with excitement. "Merry Christmas," he said, his voice loud and cheerful. I studied his face. He looked so sure, so safe, as though the ground beneath his feet was solid. If only he knew how fragile it really was. "Merry Christmas," then I replied softly. "I hope you're enjoying yourself." The children shouted, "Hi, Grandpa," and I felt a pang of love pierce through my chest. For them, I had no anger. They were innocent. But their father, he had forgotten the weight of his own blood. We talked briefly. He promised again. "Next year, I'll make it up to you." The same hollow promise he had made before. I nodded, keeping my face calm, even as I knew his next year was about to vanish. After the call ended, I sat in silence. The whiskey bottle on the table was half empty, the candle by my wife's photo burning low. I whispered to her, "Do you see? He smiles now, but tomorrow that smile will break." And I realized something important. Revenge is not only about striking back, it's about timing, letting the blade fall at the moment it cuts deepest. The phone buzzed again, this time with a notification I had been waiting for. A message from the lawyer, filed successfully, response expected within 48 hours. I closed my eyes. The trap was set. But as I prepared for bed, doubt crept in. What if this was too much? What if my grandchildren suffered because of my actions? My chest tightened with guilt. Almost instantly, anger smothered it. Michael had made his choices. He had chosen pride over family, and pride always comes before the fall. I drifted to sleep with one thought burning in my mind. Tomorrow, the storm begins. Christmas morning broke cold and gray. I sat by the window, coffee steaming in my cup, the silence of the house pressing down on me. I expected no visitors, no gifts, no laughter, just the weight of what I had set in motion. Then the phone rang. I reached for it slowly, half expecting Michael, maybe even the grandchildren, but when I answered, the voice on the other end was sharp, official. "Mr. Harris, this is a collections officers with Crescent Financial. We need to verify some information regarding your guarantor role in your son's business." I frowned for a moment, then I cleared my throat. "Yes, I am James Harris. I signed those documents years ago. I've provided the original records to the bank. Everything should be in order." The officer's tone was clipped. "Indeed, your cooperation has allowed us to proceed. We will be contacting your son directly. Thank you for your diligence." And just like that, the line went dead. My hands shook, not with fear, but with the realization that the avalanche had begun. Somewhere, maybe even at that very moment, Michael's phone was ringing with the same icy voice. His Christmas morning, wrapped in lights and presents, was about to be torn open by a reality he couldn't escape. I almost pitied him, almost. Later that day, I decided to take a walk. The snow crunched beneath my boots as I wandered through the town. Families bustled past me, arms full of gifts, children tugging at their coats. Their joy was a sharp contrast to the storm brewing just beneath the surface of my own family. I stopped at the church where my wife and I had spent so many Christmas Eves. The doors were open, the faint sound of a choir drifting out. I stepped inside quietly, the warmth of candles filling the space. I didn't pray and prayed in years, but I sat in the pew and thought of her. "Am I doing the right thing?" I whispered. My voice echoed softly in the empty air. The silence gave me no answer, but deep down, I knew sometimes justice looks like cruelty to those who don't understand the pain that came before. Evening, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Michael. I let it ring twice before answering. His voice was frantic, nothing like the cheerful son from the night before. Did you send something to the bank? They're calling me, saying old debts are back. What's going on?" I paused, letting the silence stretch, and with the calmness of a man who had waited too long, I said, "Merry Christmas, Michael. Looks like you finally remembered me." Michael's silence on the line stretched until I thought he might hang up. Finally, his voice came back, shaky and uncertain. "Dad, what did you do?" I leaned back in my chair, staring at the tiny blinking lights on my own lonely Christmas tree. I reminded the world of something you chose to forget, that every success you had was built on the sacrifices of someone else, on me. He stammered, "This will destroy me. Clara doesn't know about the debts, the kids or houseites all at risk." His panic should have softened me, but instead, it hardened me, because when he left me out in the cold, he never once thought about what that would do to me. "You told me I was too old, Michael," I said quietly. Too old to sit at your table, too old to matter, but I wasn't too old to pay your debts, was I? Not too old to sell your mother's jewelry so your life could go on. If you think I'm cruel, remember you taught me how to be invisible first. He begged then. I could hear the desperation clawing into his voice. Please, hey, we can't fix this. Just withdraw the documents. Don't do this to me. I let the silence hang heavy. Then I said, you already did this to yourself. And I ended the call. That night, sleep wouldn't come. I kept thinking of my grandchildren, innocent of all this mess. My chest ached, but the ache wasn't enough to stop me. Revenge is like fire, right? Burns everything, even the man who lit it. But once lit, you cannot blow it out. The next morning, December 26th, the storm arrived. Michael showed up at my doorstep, his face pale, his eyes wild. He didn't even knock properly, just hammered at the door until I opened it. Hey, please, he shouted the moment he saw me. The bank called again. They're freezing my accounts. Clara's furious. She's threatening to leave. You don't understand what you've done. I stood there in the doorway, calm as stone. I understand perfectly. You wanted a Christmas without me. Now you have a future without all the things I gave you. He tried to push past me into the house, but I blocked him. For the first time in our lives, he realized his old man could still stand firm. Michael, I said coldly, you forgot the meaning of family, and now, family is what you've lost. His face twisted in rage. You'll regret this. He spat before storming off into the snow. But I didn't regret it. Not yet, because I knew the real blow hadn't even landed. It was December 27th when the phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Michael. It was Martha, my neighbor, her voice trembling with excitement. James, did you hear? Your son's company has assets. Everything's being seized. The news is spreading all over town. I didn't answer her right away. I just stared at the wall, the sound of her words echoing in my ears. It was done. The hammer had fallen. Later that afternoon, I turned on the local news, and there it was, Michael's name, his company, his debts, all laid out for the public. The proud son who had once strutted with his new car was now painted as reckless, irresponsible, a failure. I should have felt triumphant, and part of me did, but another part of me ached. A father should never take pride in his son's downfall. Yet here I was, watching the world confirm what I already knew. He had forgotten where he came from. That evening, Michael came again, but this time, he wasn't angry. He was broken, his shoulders sagged, his voice hoarse. He didn't even look me in the eye. Dad, I've lost everything. The house, the car, the business. Clara's packing her bags. The kids, they don't understand. He don't know what to do. He sank to his knees right there on my porch. Snowflakes clung to his hair, his breath coming out in ragged clouds. For a moment, I almost reached down, almost lifted him up like I did when he was a child. But then I remembered the words, "You're too old." Michael, I said slowly, you didn't lose everything. You threw it away. You threw me away. And without me, you had no foundation to stand on. He looked up at me, eyes red. Please, Dad, help me. I can't do this alone. I studied him for a long time. This was the moment I had waited for, the payoff of my revenge. He was stripped of pride, forced to face the truth. His old father was not weak, not useless, not invisible. You should have thought of that before you locked me out of your life, I said firmly. Now you'll learn what it feels like to be left out in the cold. I closed the door, the sound echoing like a final judgment. For the first time in years, I felt powerful. My revenge was complete. But even as I leaned against the door, my chest tight with emotion, I wondered had I gone too far. I stood behind the closed door, my hand pressed against the wood as Michael's muffled sobs faded into the winter night. The silence afterward was deafening. My heart pounded, not with victory, but with something heavier, something I couldn't name. For days I had fed on anger, sharpening it into a weapon, and I had struck with precision. I had wanted him to feel what I felt, forgotten, unwanted, discarded, and he had. I had seen it in his eyes, but as I stood there, the echo of his broken voice replayed in my mind. I realized revenge does not taste sweet, it tastes bitter, like ashes in the mouth. I walked to the mantel where my wife's photo Saturday, her kind eyes looking back at me. I did it, I whispered. He knows now, he knows what it feels like. My voice cracked, but why does it hurt so much? The truth hit me then, because I was still a father. No matter how deep the betrayal, no matter how sharp the wound, blood ties do not break easily. My heart wanted justice, but it also wanted love. The next morning, I found myself pacing the house. The snow outside had piled high. covering the world in silence. I kept asking myself, have I taught him a lesson, or have I only destroyed him? I knew. I made H's. I put on my coat, tucked the old documents back into the wooden box, and walked through the snow to Michael's house. When I arrived, I saw the moving boxes on the porch, Clara carrying one to the car, her face a mask of anger, Michael Saturday on the steps, his head in his hands. He looked like a man who had aged 20 years overnight. When he saw me, his eyes widened with shame. He opened his mouth to speak, but no words came. I raised a hand to stop him. "Michael," I said, my voice steady, "what I did because you hurt me deeper than I ever thought you could. You made me feel invisible, and I wanted you to understand the cost of that. Now you do." He lowered his head, tears sliding down his cheeks. "Dad, I was wrong. I thought I was protecting my family, but all I did was push away the one man who built it. I don't deserve your forgiveness." I sighed, my breath clouding in the cold. "Maybe not, but forgiveness isn't about what you deserve. It's about what I can live with, and I don't want to live the rest of my life knowing I left my son in ruins." I handed him the wooden box. "These are the documents. I won't push them any further. You'll still face consequences, but maybe not the end of everything. This is your chance. Michael, don't waste it." He clutched the box as though it were a lifeline. "Thank you. I swear, I'll make it right. I'll never shut you out again." I looked at him long and hard, searching his face for truth. "I hope so, because this was your last warning. A man can only be broken so many times before he stops putting the pieces back together." I turned and walked away, the snow crunching beneath my boots. My heart was heavy, but lighter than before. Back at home, I Saturday by the fire and whispered to my wife's picture. I didn't let him go, not completely. Maybe that's what family is, pain and forgiveness, mixed together. And as the flames flickered, I realized the moral of it all. Revenge can teach a lesson, but only forgiveness can heal a wound. My son had lost everything, yes, but maybe, just maybe, he had gained something greater in understanding of the father he had almost forgotten. And as for me, I had gained my place back, not as a victim, not as a ghost, but as a man who still mattered. And